this is really quite a monumental moment for me personally. So for anyone that has followed the curve for a while or listened to these podcasts, particularly the property ones, a year ago, officially today, we started the property podcast with BNZ. And I cannot believe that in the space of 12 months, I went from being genuinely kind of concerned that I would never be able to buy property and now owning 2 investment properties. And I even just saying that, I was speaking at an event not that long ago and I was practicing at home and I started tearing up when I was doing my practice talk, because I always wanted this. And when I left New Zealand, I was quite determined to have had a property by the time I left, and it didn't happen because we started the curve and I hadn't been freelance for long enough and blah, blah, blah. And then being over here, I kind of felt like it was going to be too hard to make it happen. Both the combination of like being abroad, working for myself. I've shared the story a couple of times, had like a really negative experience with a mortgage broker who kind of like laughed at me and said that I was never going to be able to buy property. And so to be where I am today, having done 2 properties and being able to share it on the one hand, perhaps feels slightly boastful, or maybe a little bit like if you heard this without the context, maybe it sounds arrogant, I don't know. But I think it's important to share how I did it. I'm going to, in this episode, we've got Pete West joining us again, and he's the guy that I did both properties with. There's actually been some Curve community members who have worked with him, which is amazing, and have had such good results as well, just like me. But I think that it's important to be transparent, because this is an investing opportunity for anyone. It's so much easier than you might think. And this is whether or not you live overseas, you may already have a home, you may actually be able to do an investment property. I just think that, this conversation and this investing approach is easy, it's fun, and I'm really proud of what I've done. So this conversation is breaking down all of the numbers, how we managed to do a second property and what that looked like in very granular detail. So hopefully it gives a bit more colour for all of the times that I have kind of not name dropped, property dropped, that I have a second property and not explained it in much detail. But for this to kind of be the 12th episode, for us to have done the property podcast now for a year, feels very full circle to be explaining this. So I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you have any questions about how I did this, or if anything doesn't make sense, please let us know. And if you want Pete's details, we will really happily share them with anyone that wants to contact him to see if this is an investing opportunity that maybe you could do too. Okay, enjoy the episode. If you are lucky enough to get financial help from parents, BNZ Home Loan Partners can talk you through all of the options and what they mean for you. One of the best kept secrets is BNZ's Total Money Home Loan, which could help you pay off your home loan faster. You can get the best of both worlds by keeping the money you set aside available and use it to be mortgage-free faster by offsetting your home loan in connected BNZ Total Money transaction accounts. It's amazing. Parents can also help kids with Total Money too. So without actually giving them money, parents can link their Total Money transaction accounts to their kids' Total Money home loan and help them be mortgage-free faster. Whether you're buying your first home with help from family or making it happen on your own, BNZ has the tools and experience to support you from search to settlement. So book an appointment with a BNZ Home Loan Partner and get started today. Peter West, welcome back. Do you know what? You're the only guy we've had as a repeat guest on this podcast.
I'll take it.
This is your 3rd podcast. That's a huge compliment, just so you know.
True.
It is. He's like, what do you want me to say? Yeah. Thanks again.
Thanks. Good to see you, Soph. For those who don't know, we're actually a little bit late. Sophie's had her hair done, so hopefully you're all watching at home because it's looking good, mate.
I know, thank you. If anyone's not watching, I'll be really offended. Do you know what I did say to Pete, though, off mic? I was like, what do you think? What do you think? And he was like, oh, yeah, what colour is it meant to be? And I was like, blonde. How would you describe it? And he's like, blonde with streaks in it. I was like, that's honestly it's like the one thing that people don't want when they get their hair done blonde is like the zebra look, you know?
It looks expensive.
Guess how much this cost?
$300.
More.
400.
More.
$500.
600.
Was that in the budget for the week?
Well, do you know what? I have planned it for a long time.
Okay.
Anyone that goes and gets their hair coloured will know, particularly if you do blonde, when you get the regrowth, you get this like brown crown around the front of your head, and there was basically no blonde inside. It's my favourite hairdresser. She's amazing, and
you can't really say
you're the
if
first
you're not
person
happy.
that's seen it, and you've already told me, look, shit.
If you're happy, I'm happy, right?
I'm going to
I
ask
think it
your
looks
wife.
good.
I think your wife, I prefer her opinion more, if I'm being totally honest.
That's fair.
So Pete came on. There will be a lot of people that didn't listen to the first 2 episodes. So I'm not going to go over too much old ground because there's people who have listened to the series the whole way through. So we've been doing like an episode every month. It's only been a year now we've been talking about property, which is crazy because it was this time last year that I got my first house. Very exciting, very big deal. Never thought I really would get there. And then very quickly we did part 2, and I purposefully didn't want to go and talk about this because I didn't want the entire series to be like me, you know, about my if you don't want an update on my journey,
It's all about me.
but I will say there's been a lot of people who I sort of slipped in that I have a second house several times without context, and there's been people that are like, excuse me, what? So this episode today we're going to talk about how that happened, because it was certainly difficult to get number 1, but it was a lot easier to get number 2. And I think this is a really good example of the property ladder, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And being able to recycle the equity out, which a lot of people, when you're new to property, don't realise that's even a thing. So when you get to experience it firsthand and get the benefit of it, you know, it really becomes real. Before
we get into this, let's just do an overview of the first house. So the first house we bought, Escalona. It will always have a, Escalona. It does sound Spanish, and I have a special place in my heart for the word Escalona. Maybe I'll call a dog Escalona or something.
It's looking good, by the way. I drove past it and said hello to it. Yeah.
Oh my God, Pete sent us it.
Lawns are looking good. Yeah, just FYI. I did.
Wait, what's looking good?
The lawns. Like everything's very tidy, so you got some good tenants in there.
Oh my God, that's really good to know, because actually it was a single mum with 2 young kids, and she just separated from her partner and moved to Whangarei to be by family.
She actually follows me, by the way.
Does she?
Yeah.
Oh no, so she's going to listen to this.
Well, I don't know if she listens to the curve.
How do you know she follows you?
Because I made...
Also rude, she follows you and not the curve. How dare you?
Well, maybe she does. I made a reel about should you have a bath or should you have a toilet? Which the tenants prefer, and she commented on it saying, "Hey, tenant here at Escalona Street, can confirm prefer the second toilet." So she's stoked.
Way.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that is so funny.
Yeah. I've had a few people who so I flipped a house in Whangarei last year, and the current tenant texts me saying, "Hey, what colour have you painted it? We need to do some interior painting."
Oh my God, that's
pretty funny.
So funny.
Small world, yeah.
Oh, I love that. So we know the woman that's in the house. Well, I don't. You do.
Yeah, well, she follows me.
You're friends.
Yeah, we're pretty much mates. And she likes the second toilet. So
okay, good to know.
Yeah.
Okay, so we bought in Escalona Street. We bought it for, when I say we, by the way, Pete helped me with this. So it wasn't actually Pete and I going in on the property, but I did do it with a friend. So context, this was all 50-50 with a friend of mine. So we bought the house for 400,000. It was up for 480. So we got a bit of a deal, maybe 470.
Well, yeah, went to auction, reserve. They said the reserve was high 400s, was it 470 or something? And
yeah.
we knew the master negotiator haggled them down to 400.
I will say I do think that maybe some kind of auction situation is where I thrive. Like being on the spot, I'm good. Like anything that needs planning, count me out. But if you need someone to sort their shit out in the moment,
you did
I'm
good.
your girl.
You did very good.
Thank you. I needed some more recognition for that, so thank you. Pete was literally on Zoom the whole time. And then we budgeted 80,000.
Top of my head, yeah. About that.
I think it was 80,000, and we spent less than that. We
73.
Yeah. So we spent less. We spent 70,000, gave it a facelift. And then do you want to do, I know this isn't a drum roll, but there might be people that didn't hear the first episode. The equity that we made in that house was what?
So we got it revalued at 595. So the net equity gain was 122 off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Was it? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then we rented out for $690 a week to this lovely friend of ours. And I don't know what the whole like yield situation is. Is it important that we talk about that again?
Can do, yeah. So $690 a week, your all-in cost was the 400 plus the 73, so it was ended up being like a 7.5% gross yield, which is pretty good, really, really strong.
But what does gross yield mean again?
Gross yield means the annual rent divided by the purchase price and whatever you spent on the renovation. So it's sort of a crude metric that you can pretty much kind of get an idea for how much money that property's going to make you in a very quick sort of decision.
Wait, so
calculation.
7.5 is kind of almost like the return in the same way that we talk about returns with stocks.
Correct, but it's the gross yield, so it's not like the net yield because that doesn't take into consideration all the associated costs like the interest, the rates, insurance, etc. So it's just like a high level metric that you can sort of get a gauge on comparing properties one to the other when you're considering different properties.
Okay, so 7.5 gross yield. When you see 7.5 or you see 4.2 or whatever, what is it that you think? Like what's the range? And
so the national average is like 4.1 to 4.5, I believe.
And is that every year the average per house is 4.5?
Yeah, like the median rent versus the median house price in different areas. And so different houses obviously have different yields, and depending on suburbs, for example, like more expensive areas will typically have a lower yield because the house is more expensive, but you don't necessarily get that much more rent.
I don't get it. I don't know why this is not landing for me. So sorry for everyone listening if this is so easy and you're annoyed by this, but does this have anything to do with the house being cash flow positive?
Yes.
So if it was at 0%, it would be netting out. There's no increase in value year on year. Is that what it would mean?
It's sort of a gauge to tell you very quickly if the property is going to be cash flow positive or negative without necessarily running all the numbers. So for example, like a 4% gross yield property is highly unlikely it's going to be cash flow positive. But if I can see a house, run the numbers and see that it's 7% or above, then it's likely it's going to be cash flow positive depending on what the interest rates are at the time.
So the way that the reason we would look at this number or think about gross yield is essentially if you're trying to buy and you want the cost to be covered so that you're not having to put more money in.
Bang on. Yep.
Then you're looking for about a 7% gross yield.
About that. Obviously, it fluctuates depending on interest rates because if interest rates are like 3%, then it obviously can be a little bit lower. But sort of at a 5-6% interest rate, then a 7% gross yield should cover you.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
I'm just going to repeat it back to you just in case. So obviously this depends on the interest rate, but basically you take the total amount you spent on a house, so what you bought it for plus what you spend on it for a renovation, divide it by the rent you get per week.
Other way around.
God.
Get that annual rent.
Yeah.
Divide that by what you purchased the house for plus what you spent on the renovation.
So your total spend.
Divide what you're all in for. Yep.
So divide your weekly rent by the total you spent on the entire thing, whether it's, the house and reno, and then your gross yield. Ideally, you want to be above the interest rate at that time. Is that the point?
Yeah, correct. Plus a little bit more.
Okay.
Yep.
So I think it's fine to talk about this. We're going to get to my property in a second, but just for the argument, or like, I guess to try and lead on from this. So when I messaged you the other day about a friend who's looking for a house.
We're calling him a friend.
My boyfriend looking for a house. He was looking at a place that was like a certain amount, and then he was trying to figure out how much to spend on the renovation, but he wasn't renting. He was going to eventually live in it. So would you still consider a gross yield as a benchmark if it's a house to live in, or is this purely an investment kind of yardstick?
You can't really calculate it if you're going to live in it because there's no rent. I guess you could.
But you're paying it for it. So is the only purpose to figure out if you're buying an investment property, you want to know if it can cover its costs? It's the only reason.
Pretty much. It's sort of a crude metric to compare properties. Like what's the gross yield on that property? What's the gross yield on that property? And it helps you make a decision, and then also gives you a guide on is it going to be cash flow positive or negative as well.
But you would only be looking at that if you're buying investments, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So if someone's buying their first home or their second home, but they're living in it or whatever, the gross yield's not really something that they would be thinking about?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Unless they have one eye on like moving out and then they're like, oh, maybe if I can rent it once I move on or something like that, then maybe you'd want to consider it. But if it's your forever home or you're not going to move out, then it'd probably be a waste of time to think about it.
Oh, thank God we got through that section. Sorry, right. So the point of that was to say that this house is cash flow positive,
yes,
which was our goal because we wanted to buy a house that we didn't have to constantly top the mortgage up for. So my friend and I, genuinely a friend, living in London, both of us, and giving our liver away for our rent in London, and so didn't want to be then topping up mortgages in New Zealand. So the gross yield for us was really important. So once we had done the reno, we refinanced it, and this is kind of the juicy fun part. So our goal was the whole, I can't even say it, I cringe myself out. Do you want to?
The brr. Do you want to sing for the people again? Give them what they want.
So it's buy for the B, R for renovate, R for rent, R for refinance, and then R for repeat. So
Boom.
yeah, so you obviously don't have to keep repeating, but for us, we wanted to have a little property.
You want to become a mogul.
We're literally called the moguls. So, we've got to keep up with our reputation. So can we talk about, because I think the main thing that, to be really honest, was very confusing for me when it came to the second house was understanding how the property ladder works, in the sense that I couldn't understand the concept of not needing to put a deposit down. The idea that I was buying a second house and didn't need more money for the actual deposit. I mean, I spent so long trying to figure this out. I was just really confused. I was like, wait, so we don't need to put more money into this house except for the renovation? Like, that feels really weird. And it was just that ginormous penny drop moment of, oh my God, this is what they talk about the ladder, because you can use the value in something against something else. So let's walk through it slowly, because I know this took me ages to understand. So how does it work with banks lending money against properties when it comes to refinancing?
I suppose at its most basic, with an investment property, a bank in New Zealand will lend up to 70% of that value. So if you've got $1 million investment property, they will be willing to give you a $700,000 mortgage. So let's use Escalona Street as an example.
Okay.
So the bank's willing to give you, well, it got revalued at 595.
Yeah.
Bank's willing to borrow or let you borrow 70% of that. 70% of 595 is 416. But when you purchase the property, originally, you already had a mortgage of $280,000.
Yeah.
So the bank's willing to go up to 416. So the difference between 416 and your original mortgage, which I think was 280 off the top of my head,
my God,
is like the difference that they're willing to go, Sophie, here's some more coin, go to town.
Okay, so the point here is, with any mortgage, they're willing to lend you 70% of anything that you buy property. I mean, okay, I know that's a blanket rule, but just for this example. So because we'd added more value to the house, the money that we made, so the $122,000 in equity from the renovation, is technically added to the value. So there's a percentage there where we're not quite at 70% of the total value again. So they increase the mortgage to whatever it was, 412. Then the remainder we can use, it's like borrowing it again to buy the new one.
Bang on.
But I think the thing that's confusing is, okay, so say the bank gave us 136 for the next house.
Yes.
Which I think was the amount,
Yep.
136. What about the mortgage? Is the mortgage all of a sudden increasing even more, or is it a second mortgage on the second house?
They increase the mortgage on your existing property.
So we're now we've borrowed 70% of, or is that kind of irrelevant? They basically,
They can do it either way, as long as there's sufficient equity across both of them. So whether they load up your new property with 100% debt and leave the old one with less debt, it really depends on the bank and what they do. So I don't know what they did in your specific example, but it's sort of, they look at it as a collective across both properties. Do you still have the 30% equity? And so therefore they can give you 70% borrowing.
So basically what ended up happening was, because the bank was willing to increase our mortgage and essentially release the funds that we'd kind of made in equity on the renovation in the first house to then put against the second, the only thing that we had to fund from a cash perspective was the renovation.
Correct, yeah.
And when I say we, I mean my dad.
Well, yeah, you had sufficient equity increase in equity to be able to recycle that out and use that as the deposit. There was 136k there, so that's great. That's enough for a deposit on a 450k house.
So we were limited at that, basically, in terms of what we could get from a mortgage perspective and refinancing. There was a certain amount we had to look at within range.
Yeah, correct. You had 136k to work with, which is bang on our target purchase price of like 450. So it worked out well. In the end, obviously, we could have got something cheaper maybe, and that would have given a bit more wiggle room, but our target purchase price is around that 450, so that was bang on.
Yeah. Also, I just would like to say I'm paying my dad back for the loan for the renovation.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you had enough for the deposit, which is great.
It was quite stressful, wasn't it? Because
that means you still had to fund the renovation with your own cash, right? And some people think that you can just recycle all the money out and get enough for to fund the deposit and the renovation. That's quite tricky. Like we did pretty well with you with 120. So to go immediately again, you typically need some cash on hand, savings from the year or whatever that may be.
And I was in a position where, so the friend I was doing it with was fine, had enough cash flow. I, however, was in dire straits. And that's dramatic, but I definitely didn't have what we had budgeted, which was around 80,000 to 100,000 to spend on the renovation. And it was just such a stretch. I remember thinking, God, can I do this? Can I do this? And I actually considered several things. I considered taking KiwiSaver out. I considered a whole lot. And then I actually just asked my dad. I'm so lucky that I could do that. But I basically loaned money from him rather than the bank.
Right.
And he gave me a really generous 5% interest rate. So when I sell the house, and hopefully not for a long time, maybe 5 years, I'll pay him back plus 5%, which I was so lucky for, because basically the context of doing it with a friend, we were like, this is too good of an opportunity. We should go for this house, blah, blah, blah. And then it would have made the who owned what awkward, because it would have tipped, we wouldn't have been 50-50 anymore. So
Yeah. Big Mike charging you 5%.
Is that a lot?
I would have thought so, but fair.
Michael, all right.
Yeah, go have a chat with him.
My dad pulled the wool over my eyes. No, I think he wanted to keep up with inflation.
Right.
Which is kind of valid, right?
Yeah, it's fair.
But over a 5-year period.
No special treatment around here. It's good to see.
Oh my God. I'm quite gutted. Have I then done my own dad?
You could have gone to a bank, maybe cheaper. No, to be fair, that's a bit harsh. That's home loans cheaper than that, but you'd be unsecured. But he knows where you live, so that's fair.
So I could have gone 3%, is what you're saying.
Hey, have a conversation with Mike.
I might just have a quick look at that contract, see if I can adjust some of the key terms. Okay, right. So let's move on to basically, I've talked about this millions of times, but I do think that it's worth just talking about the idea that there's obviously different ways to invest, right? Lots of people are buying their first home, second homes, beach houses. Some people don't own any property. And there's some people who are living in rented housing and then actually still rented housing. That sounded odd, didn't it? Did you pick up on that? No.
Yeah, rented housing.
Yeah. I said it and I thought, I want to swallow that word. Yeah. So, and then there's people who are doing what we're doing, which is trying, whether it's flipping or trying to get several properties as sort of a portfolio. I want to definitely talk about how scary it was second time versus the first time.
Okay.
I feel like the first time I was absolutely so nervous, didn't know what was going to happen, was trying so hard to temper my expectations. Second time, I was so chilled.
That's interesting. From my perspective, I didn't really notice a huge difference. Maybe it was all internal. Yeah. You were just fizzed up both times.
Oh my God, that is such good feedback.
Yeah.
Sometimes I do wonder how other people interpret my...
Yeah, no, you guys seem pretty chill.
Okay.
Very trusting. You're like, seems to be going well. You weren't micromanaging or you weren't...
I meant more at the start in terms of going again. We just saw how long it took me to understand the refinancing. I think it felt too good to be true. I was like, no, wait, we don't have to put money into the deposit?
I think you were both maybe a little bit surprised that you could go again. Is that fair?
Yeah, I would say so. So quickly too.
Because remember we sort of did the project and then it was like, cool, great, thanks. And then you guys came back a month ago saying, hey, bank said we can go again. So I was like, great.
That's right. We basically went straight back to the bank, didn't we?
Yeah, you went straight back to the bank. And then you got back in touch and said, Pete, let's go again. So I was like, cool, let's do it. I don't know how those conversations went with your investing partner, but from my perspective...
Oh, that's better. Let's call him that, not my friend. That's much better.
It seemed like you guys were all guns blazing and confident to go again. So the story of your second, are we there? Should we jump into
let's do it. Yeah.
Cool. So you guys came back saying, hey, Pete, ready to go again? So I was like, awesome, let's do it. So started looking for you, and good timing around that time. A real estate agent who I've done a few deals with knows what sort of properties we look for, got in touch and said, hey, I've got an off-market deal. Now, what's an off-market deal? Just to quickly explain, it's a property which doesn't go to market. It's not advertised, so you won't see it on Trade Me, you won't see it on realestate.co.nz. And so why would people do that? Various different reasons, but maybe there's something wrong with the property. Maybe they don't want lots of people to do open homes. Maybe it's messy and they know only certain people are going to buy it, right? So they can cut themselves a lot of hassle through doing that. They don't have to pay marketing material, etc. And so we found one of those homes, and so the process was, I went and checked it out for you. And it ticked all the boxes. Absolutely stunk of cat piss. So I was glad.
Did it actually stink?
I was glad.
I don't think you told me that.
No, I didn't actually.
I don't know if I would have been okay with that if I'd known.
It shocks my mum, who actually went through it, was like, you're not buying that house, are you? I was like, yeah, it's perfect. And she's like, the smell. I was like, yeah, you got to look through that. It really.
Sorry, can I say love that you brought your mum to look at it? It's so cute.
But it ticked all the boxes. Like, it was tired, but not completely falling apart. We could add a bedroom. It was large. It was in a good area. So we can talk about that in terms of why we chose it. But it ticked all the boxes. And so, we went through the process of buying it off market, which was great because you don't have the competition of an auction or the worry about missing out. Got through the trades through, checked it out, got all the quotes for the works. And then, went through that process, which took quite a bit of time, probably about a month, wasn't it? 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah, I wasn't feeling confident because the first one was so fast, like wham, bam, onto it. And then the second one, and I don't mean you were slow, I just mean the process was slower.
Yeah, well, we were trying to balance the vendor. They were trying to buy a house, right? And so they wanted to, they were trying to haggle and extend when the deadline was due and things like that, and we had to play a bit of hardball to get it across the line, but we got there in the end. That's right. So we ended up picking it up for $450,000.
And how did we do that? Was there any we'll do this, we'll do that? What was the process?
In terms of...
Can I just say I was a little bit more involved and perhaps intelligent with this whole thing. It's been a while. Yeah. I think that's why my memory is fading.
So we went through, we ran the numbers just like we did for your first property. What's to make sure we're going to hit our KPIs? What's it going to be worth at the end? What's it going to cost us to renovate? How much money do I want to make? And therefore, what can we afford to offer? So we went through that. I suppose we should mention the property is in Te Awamutu. So a different market to your original property up in Whangarei. So it's quite nice to diversify away for you, I think, not having 2 houses in the same market. I mean, if something happens in Whangarei.
I was going to say, is that a thing? Because I guess in the same way we think about investing in stocks, the stock market, different sized companies, different countries, different index, all that kind of thing. Is it the same thing when it comes to property? If you've got a portfolio, you may as well, if you can, buy in different areas because they move slightly differently? Yeah,
each market can move at a different rate. So it sort of diversifies your risk in case, if you've got everything in Whangarei and it doesn't go that great for the next 10 years, but sort of Waipa and Hamilton do, then you can sort of mitigate that risk, as well as mitigating natural disaster risk. If you've got 2 places in the same place and a storm comes through and damages them, you're sort of mitigating that risk as well. So I think it's not necessarily critical with, I shouldn't say only 2 houses because that's a feat, but do you know what I mean? If you had 20, 30 houses, you definitely want to do it, but you wouldn't necessarily have to do it straight away, but it's a bonus that we managed to achieve that for you, I think, but it wasn't the primary goal of why we bought there.
And so what, if we were to think about what made you feel confident in that area, and maybe we can keep this not super New Zealand specific in terms of just thinking about where you buy, because there'll be people that are listening in all different parts of the world. So what was it about this rural town that most people would not have heard and thought, oh, I see an investing opportunity. Why this one? And what were your big green ticks?
First and foremost, it's a decent enough size hub, but it's relatively close to a larger hub, a town of 200,000 people, which in New Zealand sense is relatively big. So there's lots of employment in that sort of larger hub, which employment is great because it brings people into the city. And then house prices naturally, there's more demand for houses, so there's going to be long-term growth prospects.
So that's essentially zooming out from the idea. If you can't afford to buy in a main centre, look at the places that are close where people would be commuting from for jobs in a busier area within reason. Because the same could be said for example, in London, there's a lot of people that come from outside of London because it's so expensive to live there, but they commute. Or do you know what's another really interesting comparison? When gold was doing well and then all of a sudden silver does, it's like, what's sort of the next step to that investment if you think logically?
Yeah, correct. Sort of just by almost association physically, So it has that benefit. It's got diversified employment. Like, yes, there's a large employer and a large factory in the town, but it's not the only employer. Do you know what I mean? So if that employer goes bust, the town's not going to be desolate. So that's really important as well. Diversifies the risk for you. So there's good employment and it's diversified is the other really key factor which made Te Awamutu a good option for you. And then there's the actual house itself. And so first and foremost, it had no hazards. There's no slope. There was no floodplain or anything like that. You don't have to go for that, but it's just a little bit easier. Insurance is going to be a bit cheaper, and it's obviously inherently less risky than being on a slope. So that's a bonus as well. Other things generically about the house, it's a tidy flat section, which means the tenants are going to look after it, versus if you've got like a sloping section with lots of garden, the tenants aren't going to look after it, you know what I mean? So it's going to be a low maintenance property for you. Also, it was quite a character home. It's a weatherboard home.
There was that cool archway thing. We didn't get to keep it, sadly.
It's gone.
I know.
But it's a weatherboard home, which people value that in New Zealand. It's a bit more maintenance for you. Like, you're going to have to repaint it, but there's that visual aspect as well, which makes it quite nice to look at and will make it easier to sell down the line. We've talked about the pros of the house, but to be fair, there were a few cons, so let's talk through those.
Yeah, good idea.
The house was more tired than Escalona. So it was a weatherboard house and there was a bit of rot in the weatherboards, which meant and the paint was failing on the exterior. So we had to paint the exterior of this one.
And I remember last time, and actually maybe even on the podcast, you said that it would be ideal if you can avoid exterior painting because it's kind of a hassle and it's expensive.
Yeah, correct. And then long term for you as well, like one downside was it's a timber weatherboard house. There's going to be more maintenance on that for you long term. So that was a consideration. Back over to the pros. It was a large house though, so that was really beneficial. Like 120 square meters in New Zealand is a really good size for a rental. Back over to the cons, the roof was old, like 60 plus years, concrete tile roof. And so that's getting towards the end of its life. So you're going to be up for a replacement in the next sort of five years. Maybe you could get it longer, but we had that conversation and said, hey, just, this could come down the line and you're looking at maybe like 25 grand, you know what I mean? So we had that consideration
I
as well.
forgot about that.
Yeah. Look, it's been there for 60 years.
I'm so glad you brought that up though.
It's been there for 60 odd years. It's still, we painted it. So it's doing a good job at the moment, but it is definitely for when you go to sell it, someone's going to point that out. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're definitely going to be up for a new roof before you sell it. So those were some of the cons, but when we zoomed out and looked at the overall picture, we could still hit our KPIs. It was still in a good area, so we thought, let's go for it. So you picked it up. We haggled down to 450. We thought the renovation was going to be 90 to 100, which we can we bring up here now that you mentioned? I've got a bone to pick with you.
Yeah. Well, is it me? I don't know if it's me. It's not my fault. It's my investing partner's fault.
So Sophie happened to drop that she had a budget blowout with the renovation, which I then have clients ringing me going, what happened to Sophie's project? Because they listen to the curve. And so I'm going, no, we didn't have a budget blowout. We stuck to plan and she got 130 net gain. So,
honestly, it's so bad. It's so bad. I got this voice note from people like, hey, so like there's a few clients concerned about budget blowouts. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, I don't know. I honestly, I must have blacked out that I spoke about it on the podcast, but also I totally just trusted my bloody investing partner because he was like, oh, well, with the reno blowouts. And I'm like, I don't know. I didn't know there was this is kind of what I was getting at with the whole like paying less attention and probably less scared and more confident in part 2 is part 1 went so well. So I was just very hands off. I kind of didn't even remember what you'd estimated we'd be spending.
Well, yeah, and probably a lesson for me too. So it was obviously our second house. So when we were going through the process,
we were way more lax about it.
Way more lax. I was like, right, the reno's going to be between 90 and 100 grand.
Sorry, that's so funny that people.
And normally I'd email the client saying, hey, here's our agreed budget, but it was our second house, so I just didn't bother. I thought we'd sort of agreed it. No meeting minutes were taken. Anyway, we ended up, we'll speak about it soon, we ended up coming up at 100 grand, which was the top end of the 90 to 100. But so the investing partner told Sophie that, there's been a blowout.
I mean, he's probably going to listen to this and be like, now you're throwing me under the bus and I didn't do anything wrong. Look, let's just get the record here very clear. I'm not great with details. I'm very good with big picture, fruity blue sky thinking, but anything that is in the granular detail, I completely zone out at. So anyway, had an accidental slip that Pete's terrible at his job and blew out the budget, which he did not. Also, I think what's probably worth mentioning though with this is the reason it was a big deal for me is because I was already loaning money.
A bit more sensitive to it.
I thought that, and I probably had misjudged the amount that I was going to need. So I had to go back for round 2 to my darling father and say, oh my God, I'm sorry, I've mucked these numbers up. I'm actually going to need more. So, I mean, that's my own problem. Yeah. But if I think it's just worth saying when it comes to property, it's really easy to get excited and go to the high end of what you're spending, whether it's what you're buying the actual house for or what you're renovating. And having a buffer is so important. Even you reminded me of the roof. I completely forgot that we could be spending 25 grand on a roof in the next 3 years, but my point is that you do have to be, you don't want to put yourself or other people in a position where it's, imagine if we got halfway through the reno and I was like, can't afford it.
Happens. That's how people end up in mortgagee sales and all sorts. So don't do that. Right. Now that we've got that, we've cleared the air. Yeah. Clients, don't worry.
Yeah, everyone don't stress. Pete's very good at his job.
So plan attack was 90 to 100 grand for the renovation. What were we doing for that? Unfortunately, we had to paint the exterior, but all the same things as the last property, right? New kitchen, new bathroom. We managed to get a 4th bedroom into this place. There was a separate lounge, which we couldn't get much easier than that. We closed it off and made it a 4th bed. So the more significant cost was the extra painting exterior. And replacing those rotten weatherboards. Yeah,
those were the majors.
Those were the majors, as well as trying to get rid of the cat piss smell.
Yeah. How did you do that?
Well, I actually had a bit of a worry.
Did you think it was in the floorboards?
Was
it that bad?
It was that bad. So we got rid of the carpets, and then you'd expect, I was like, that should be gone, and then the house still stunk, and I was like, oh no.
You did not tell us this.
Yeah, well I took the stress on for you. I was searching how to get cat piss out of floorboards because it was in the floorboards. But thankfully,
disgusting.
we just opened the house up for 3 weeks, let it dry out, and the smell was all gone.
But can we just pause for a second? What was happening in that house? Was the cat?
There were some pets that just weren't allowed outside. Yeah.
Oh, they weren't allowed outside.
Yeah, it's pretty sad.
So they were going in a litter perhaps, and then
don't know. There were cats in there when I went to go check it out. So. Who knows?
Was the owner worried about the cats escaping?
I think so.
That's really sad.
You see all sorts of things when you go through houses. Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay. Right. So then when we finished, how long did it take us?
So it took 6 weeks. So a little bit longer. I think we managed to get through Escalona in 5 weeks. So a little bit longer. Obviously, exterior painting. There was more to do with this one. So our standard 6 weeks. So the renovation. It went to plan in terms of six weeks, which was great. Obviously, sort of mentioned there was maybe a few more curveballs, a little bit more work with the rot than we sort of anticipated, but that's why you have the contingency. So it pretty much went to plan. And then once again, we got it revalued, and so that came in at 680. 680 less what we spent on the reno, 100k minus what you purchased it for, 450. So there's a net gain of 130. So actually.
Stunning work, Peter.
Better than Escalona.
Really, honestly, didn't expect that given all the things that kind of not went wrong, but it was a much more complicated, probably I imagine from your side, stressful reno. So the fact that it ended up, the equity gained was so great.
Better. Yeah, really good result. And then rented relatively quickly. 3 weeks for that?
Yeah, not long.
3 weeks for that. And then you're achieving 650. Did you get 650 for it?
Yeah.
650.
Weekly rent.
Yeah,
Yeah.
weekly rent. So that's like just over 6% gross yield, is it?
Well, that's like a good example actually, Pete, because this is less from a yield perspective than the first house.
Correct.
But our net gain, the equity we made was more.
Yeah, correct.
So why? Oh, we're back here.
No, we're not doing it.
Oh, we're not doing it. But can
don't
you
go down the rabbit hole.
But well, I don't get it because this one was more successful in inverted
Well,
commas.
successful in an equity gain perspective, but it's not if you just looked at it on a pure yield perspective, you'd say it's a worse investment. But it's in Te Awamutu, which you might say, okay, well, that's a more superior location than when your other house is. So you're willing to accept that, if you know what I mean.
I reckon that this is going to be similar to when we started talking about stocks in the stock market.
Yeah, should we give it a stock example? Like if you've got a stock that's consistently performing, is that now I'm testing my own knowledge? Is that going to be worth less to the market or more to the market?
Less to the market.
Less to the market because it's just real easy to predict,
it's
right?
got like more,
real easy to predict.
consistent gains.
Yeah, correct. So you're willing to accept. It's like bonds from the government, right? Like it's real stable. They're going to pay you back. So you're willing to accept a lower yield on those, right, or a lower cash return on those, versus taking something like a higher risk. You're going to expect a higher yield and a higher dividend in that stock. Sort of like houses. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
TA's more trusty. Whangare's a little bit more risky.
Oh, interesting. I so would have said it was the other way around. That's so interesting.
Yeah.
So the second house outperformed Escalona by about 8,000.
On a pure equity, net gain equity perspective,
Yes.
but it's a lower gross yield property for you.
So is technically our first house more successful?
Depends how you judge it, really. Depends what's more important to you.
Well, what are the two options?
Do you place more value on the equity gain or do you place more value on the yield?
I think the equity gain.
Yeah, okay. Then to you, your second property would be more of a success.
I think I would think that, but because the second one was still cash flow positive.
Yeah, still cash flow positive of like
That's all I care about.
Yeah.
I just want it to be cash flow positive. I don't care really if it's shooting the lights out with heaps of leftover money week to week, because we're not going to be making much money in these houses. What like cumulative, more exciting, and maybe this is just how my brain works for me, the net gain, whatever it's called.
Yeah, so you made $8,000 more on that. Your property is still cash flow positive, so you're not having to top it up, which is great. All in all, a second successful purchase for you.
Very successful.
Bring on number 3.
I think so. So this is what I wanted to talk about was I can't renovate a third property right now because I don't have the cash.
Correct.
But if we were to go for a third to buy, how would we think about that?
Well, you've got sufficient usable equity once again in your second property.
And that would be the 130?
Yeah, correct. Like you can borrow 70%. Yeah, yep. 30.
Well, you're going to try and make it more
I was going to go back into the numbers.
Thank God.
Yes, let's keep it simple. You've got that $130,000, which is a sufficient deposit for a $450K purchase.
Right. So the point here is if I wanted to go higher, like I wanted to get a more valuable house, say 600,000,
Wouldn't be enough.
it wouldn't be enough. I would need to put more money in.
Correct, yeah. So, but we could go purchase you a third property worth $450K tomorrow if you wanted, subject to bank approval. Now, obviously, it sounds like you don't have the cash to fund those renovations. So option A is you could buy the house and not renovate it straight away.
But could you rent it out still?
Yeah,
because it
so
depends on the quality.
Provided it's in a rentable condition. Do you know what I mean? But you could buy something that's livable and then hold on to it. Or you could take a personal loan. You've probably tapped out Mike by the sounds.
Well, you never know. Now I've found out he's absolutely fucked me over with my interest rate.
So go around the family, play them off each other. And then the other alternate is, typically house prices obviously, rise 5 or 6%. And so you can get them with those increased gains. You could then recycle that out. But that's going to take a bit of time. And at the moment in New Zealand, you're probably not going to see that this year.
So do you think then, so if I was to buy a third, we would need to buy something around the 450 mark?
Yep.
And I guess the prerequisites would be you would want it to be in an okay condition, that it's not going to need heaps of work or upkeep. Because I guess because we just renovated the other two, they're in much better condition. So there's not going to be a huge amount of my toilet's broken situation. Is that the risk that you may have to spend cash on the house falling apart a bit?
Yeah, correct. You'd have to make sure it's healthy homes compliant, right? And like insulation, heating, etc. So you'd have to at least meet that as a bare minimum. So you'd probably want to check that out during due diligence. But it could be a worthwhile option. It means you could get something now and then hopefully get some capital gains this year, rather than sort of waiting until you've got enough cash saved up from savings to fund the next renovation.
Because it's probably quite a good time to buy, right? We're still sort of at the bottom of the property market.
Yeah, it's a great time to buy in general. Like, I personally think we're still bubbling along the bottom of the market. We're not seeing prices rise consistently yet. So great time. Interest rates are low. Like, you can still get a 1 year interest rate below 5% at the moment. There's lots of housing stock around still. So lots of available options, and also a pretty unique time, Kāinga Ora. I'm just trying to think what the equivalent in the UK is called for our UK listeners. State houses. The state is selling off lots of houses at the moment, and so those are prime for the types of houses that we look to renovate. So pretty unique time to be buying at the moment. And also there's no FOMO. Like, as soon as FOMO kicks in, it's a pain in the ass, right? Because everyone just starts paying silly money. Vendors get really cocky, thinking, that's too low, and I'll wait for the next one. Whereas at the moment,
everyone's taking what they can.
Their doors aren't getting kicked down. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's a really good time to be negotiating at the moment. Like, if we find something wrong with the property, you can negotiate really hard. For example, client this week, we got like 40 grand off for something. Do you know what I mean?
Can we talk about that? Because that was someone from the Curve community just got a house today, didn't they?
Yeah. Shout out.
Can we say her name?
Deirdre and Dave. Shout out.
Oh my God, Deirdre and Dave. I'm so happy for you. That's so fun.
Yeah. So pretty stoked for them. It's been a journey. This is the third property that we've had a crack at for them. The first two, we got under contract. Both of them we found things during due diligence, tried to get enough off, and then the vendors just, we couldn't quite get it across the line. Banks, funding, also unconsented. It was unconsented works. Getting funding from banks can be quite tricky in that scenario. So a couple fell over, but got this one over the line for them. So pretty stoked. And yeah, it's been a journey because once again found unconsented works. So we had to work through that and what that all means and the remedies and getting the banks and insurance across the line. So pretty stoked for them. So shout out Dave and Deirdre.
Oh, that's so exciting for them. And did they hear about working with you through the podcast?
Yeah, correct. Yeah,
that's just the best ever.
Yeah, had a few people reach out, which is pretty cool.
Do you have space for more people?
Yep. Yeah. So
maybe actually we did something last time, and I can't remember if we've still got it up, but there was like a link for people to give more details, right?
Yeah, correct.
Or is it on our website?
It's on your website,
yeah,
so
okay.
they can
link in the podcast show notes, everyone.
They can go to that. So yeah,
have you actually finished working with someone from the Curve? Like, it sounds like there's a few milling around in the client pool, but have any of them actually finished?
Yeah, no. Louise and Ben, hope you don't mind me saying your name. So they're the first ones which came through. Because when did I go on the pod? Like June?
Yeah, around then.
June. And so a few people came on board after that.
Oh, cool.
And so they were the first clients, and we finished up the project.
Can I just say go Louise and Ben?
Yeah.
Because it's so brave to do something a bit different, like when you see all your friends and people around you and all you've ever heard is invest in property by buying a home and living in it, it does take courage to do it differently. So that's really cool.
Yeah, they're awesome. And I caught up with them recently, and they're like, people were telling us don't do it and doubting, and they
were they?
Yeah, like all their friends were like, what are you doing?
Well, I had the same thing actually.
You're paying some guy to buy you a house and renovate it? And she's like, yeah. And,
go Louise, that's so iconic.
So they're awesome. Really cool people, awesome to deal with. So we got them a house in Whangarei also.
Are we neighbours?
Renovated, kind of suburb over.
Okay.
Suburb over. So got them a house, renovated it. Yeah, went to plan, 6-week reno. We finished it just before Christmas, so unfortunately couldn't rent it straight away because not a great time to be. People don't want to move the week before Christmas, do they? But we knew that going in, and I told them hey, maybe we might be able to rent it, but maybe we won't be able to rent it. But it's still worth it. It sat there for 4 weeks over that period. And we rented out in January. And so they're happy.
That's so amazing.
Hit the KPIs for them. Once again, like a 7% gross yield for them and over 100K net gain. So they're happy. They're going to go on holiday to South Africa, and then they're coming back. We're doing property too. So they're pretty cool.
Stop. Okay, can you please put me in touch with Louise and Ben? Because I want to get a testimonial. Would I? Yeah, stop. Should we all hang out?
Let's
get everyone that buys property through Pete. We'll just start our own little club.
Start a little chat. So yeah, that was
That's
really cool.
amazing.
And then the other people were still, well, as I say, Deirdre and Dave just got a house for them today, and then there's a few more that we're just working on. As you say, can take a while to find the right property, so we're getting there.
Yeah, oh, that's so cool. Now, Pete, before we wrap this up, there's some questions that have come through from socials. Let's just go through a couple of these. So the first one is, are both properties cash flow positive? Yes, we've gone through that. How did you take the next step? Were you nervous it wouldn't rent? I do think the nervous it wouldn't rent is kind of an interesting one.
A lot of people, it's often people's biggest concern, to be fair, which kind of surprises me. I would have thought, I don't know, maybe it's my brain, the people think about like overpaying for the house and...
No, people don't know about that.
Overpaying for the house and like spending too much on the renovation.
No, but I think that is such an obvious... Sorry, that's really rude. I think that's a really good example of how so many of us don't understand how property buying works, because I didn't know the idea of buying well was so important. I also didn't think... I just assumed you spend money on the renovation, it goes up in value, but there's so many things you can spend money on that don't add any value.
Yeah, correct. So... What was the question again? Was it hard to rent?
Yeah, were you nervous about renting it? And you were just saying a lot of people get nervous about it.
Yeah, it's pretty common. A lot of people ask about that. So my response to that is how do you mitigate? It is a risk for sure. How do you mitigate that risk? Well, firstly, when you're looking at your numbers, assume a realistic rent. Don't go in there thinking you're going to charge $700 when actually a realistic rent is $600, right? Like if you're asking market rate or a competitive price, then you're going to be able to fill it, because people need ultimately somewhere to live. As well as that, you've got to remember that you've just freshly renovated this house, right? So on the market compared to other houses, your house is going to be right at the top of what people want compared to a house which has been sitting there for 20 years and hasn't been renovated, right? So there's that aspect as well. So as long as you price it right and it's done to a good spec, which we do because we fully renovate the house, then it shouldn't be an issue. Now, caveat to that is obviously the rental market at the moment is a little bit softer, but that's sort of a nationwide trend. But the worst, I mean, yours took 2 or 3 weeks, right? So,
yeah, it was so easy. That was so not what I was worried about. Who manages the properties for you? And what are the costs involved? So Pete actually put us in touch, I think, with both of our property managers.
Yeah, correct. Yep. Standard, if I can use that term, is like 8% plus 8% of the rent plus just.
We pay about $4,600 a year for one. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, now you're testing my maths, but
right.
Yeah, you should be paying about 8% for that. So yeah, obviously you guys are remote, so it's a good idea to have a property manager. You can't go and inspect the properties. You can't do the various maintenance. So definitely recommend using a property manager if you're remote. Yeah, and they're good at what they do, right? And there's a fair bit of legislation involved. Like tenants have a fair few rights in New Zealand, so if you don't do the right things, then you can find yourself in trouble and not being able to claim various things if it ends up in tenancy tribunal and things like that. So using a professional, in my opinion, is definitely worth it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm so glad we have. I do feel a bit sorry for ours though, because they email us and we completely ignore them. Hi, we've got a broken tap. I'm like, yeah, don't care about the, like I find it really, I'm not great at admin, shocking for most, but I really struggle with the whole comms. I trust you, we're paying you, you make the decision. But I do think when you're having to be quite careful on being cash flow positive, because we're cash flow positive with buffer, if they need to trim that bloody hedge that keeps growing like
the world's fastest growing hedge.
Sorry, I feel like every 2 weeks they're like, the hedge is growing again.
We need
to talk about that off mic because that's ridiculous. Someone's fed it like Monster Energy or something.
And what's wrong with like a slightly overgrown hedge? It's not impacting them.
No.
Anyway, we'll talk about that later. Offline.
Pete, thank you so much. Thank you so much again for such a fun. I mean, was I as involved the second time? Obviously not from this episode, but I loved it and I'm so proud of it. And I would just like to say for anyone who is listening to this and thinking, I really would love to know if I would be eligible for investing in property. You don't have to have a portfolio yet. If you're starting with your first one, you do need a decent amount of money for the deposit and the reno, but it's not honestly as much as you think. So I think just like investigate, and Pete can help you out to see if you're ready or, how far away you might be. And also if you own a home, but you want to invest in more property, you can actually use the equity in your house you're living in. So there's lots of ways to do this. You don't have to do it the way that I have. And Pete's obviously the expert, not me. So
yeah, people who've owned a house for 5+ years will often have enough equity and they don't realize it. I have so many of those conversations where people are, oh shit, I can do something already. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, if you are considering about it, go speak to a mortgage broker is my advice. And they will tell you, they don't charge you first and foremost. And they'll tell you what you can and can't do. So you might often be a lot closer to being able to get an investment property than you think. So it's definitely worth just having the conversation.
No, thank you so much, Pete. Always love talking about property with you. And thank you again for my house. I'm very happy. Houses. On to the third.
Oh, girls. Thank you. Pleasure.
Did you love this episode?
Yes.
Have you got property front and centre in your
Yes.
mind? Sounds like you're a 5-year-old.
I know.
Now could be the time to take the first step towards what it is that you're wanting to buy. Whether that's your first home, whether that's a new flat, whether it's, I don't know, buying another investment property.
And thankfully, BNZ has the expertise and tools to help you get started, and their home loan partners are ready whenever you are.
You can book an appointment, you can ask millions of questions. Trust me, that is totally fine. And you can start turning the property dream that you have into a plan and hopefully soon into a reality. I know from experience that this can feel quite overwhelming, but when you're working with experts who can actually help you get there, it's such a burden off your shoulders to know that you've got the advice and the tools that you need to actually make it happen.
We know how hard it can feel and like overwhelming and just, so like a fish out of water when it comes to buying properties. So we're so thankful to BNZ to be helping us create and empower this podcast so that people can learn, and we just want you all to succeed. We want you all to succeed. We're all in your corner, and this is going to be such a game-changing property podcast series.
Yes, and for anyone that is going through the process of either buying a house or a flat or whatever it is that you're trying to do, please let us know, because we would love to be cheering you on from the sidelines. But thank you so much again to BNZ for empowering this podcast. Okay, quickly, The Curve was created to empower and educate you about investing, but we are not financial advisors.
Our platform exists for educational purposes only, and it doesn't provide personalised investing advice for your individual needs and should not be relied upon to make an investment or financial decision.
And always remember to do your own research before making any investment or financial decision.
We're here for any knowledge and support you need, but the final call is always yours.
And thanks for being here.
You got this.
Yeah, we know you got this.